And so
Right.
think of the kind of models that way. They'll be specialized. They'll have and that will lead to agents. They'll be powering agents, which will be very specialized. You're not going to have a generic AI agent that does everything for you. You're going to have hundreds of specialized agents that do things for you. And going back to the GPT thing, that's the whole point of the custom GPTs.
This is sponsored by the GTM AI Academy, your go-to source for learning how to use AI in companies, teams, and in your individual workflow. Business impact over learning tools. Hello and welcome back, everyone. It is I, Coach K, and I have my man with me, Jonathan Moss. Finally, I get to see your interviews, and you see mine, and we've had one of these, but this is our second time, so I'm really glad we get to do this now once again. So I'm excited to have you, my man. How are you?
Same, man. It's always one of the most fun things I look forward to in a month. So hanging out with you. And in fact, we're
Oh,
gonna
stop
see
it.
each other here pretty soon. So get to do this
Yeah, that's
IRL
right.
style, which will be great. But yeah,
That's
no, it's
right.
great to be back.
Yeah, for those listening, this should be publishing. I'll publish this tomorrow, which is September 24th. And in a month, this will both be in Austin at the Pavilion GTM event, which will be a lot of fun. We'll come at you live in the charge in Austin, which will be fun. But today, really excited to talk to you because I know there's a ton of stuff going on in the AI space as per usual. But what I wanted to focus on more was how you're thinking around GPTs, because you've been talking about this for months, long, long time. Ever since the custom GPT came out, you've been talking about this. And I really wanted to dive into, first off, your thinking on it and how you think about both the use of a GPT and then the actual creation. What do you do to actually create an effective GPT? And then you'd be showing me one of your GPTs to showcase what it can do for you. So I know it might be me more interviewing you, at least at first, because I'm really curious on what you're doing. And then for those of you listening, if you're not listening to this via video, we will be showing some stuff that we'll try our best to make sure we describe it to you. But if not, hop on YouTube. You can see the video as well. So that being said, let's start off
Awesome.
talking about it. What
All
do you
right.
think about GPTs and how you approach when do you decide I'm going to make a GPT for this? What's that process like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think GPTs, and I know we're going to chat a little bit about the future or maybe in future episodes of this one, but I think
Yeah.
of a GPT as the starter kit for an AI agent. And so what I mean by that is the things that, if you think about things that you have to repeat on an ongoing basis, things that need a similar prompt. So, for example, let's say I want to do account research. So, I've created a GPT for account research. That's something that's repeatable. That's something that's kind of high velocity. You do a lot, etc.
Right.
And the steps that you're trying to take are very similar each time. So therefore, instead of having to open a new chat, prompt it, do all those things, you can actually build out the flow that you want with the prompts that you want, and it's there and it just works for you. So the
Yeah.
first thing I think about is there something that I do that someone or myself does on some sort of frequency, and
Right.
some of the flows and things are similar. And so that's how I initially think, should I use a GPT or should I just pop open a chat and go from there? So I think that's
Mm,
one thing. The other thing is, and the one I'm going to show you today is really building our go to market strategy. Is the workflow also somewhat complex, meaning that it's either long, and so
yeah.
there's a lot of things that go into it, or are there multi step things that the GPT or the AI needs to do? And so I think about it from that standpoint too. How complex or how long is it? That way I can just build it one time, and then use it over and over again. And the third thing I'll say is, do I want it to have a knowledge repository, right? That I want it to reference. And so from that standpoint, like the one I'll show you today as well, it has a knowledge base. So I've actually uploaded PDFs and things that I want it to particularly reference first as a
Right.
primary option when it's
Right.
doing its work for me. And then I'll say the final thing is, now with actions, especially on GPT, and we actually were just chatting about this a little bit right before we jumped on,
Yeah.
was are there integrations or third party sources or things that I want it to leverage or use? And so a good example of that is we talked about Make, Zapier. So you can create these actions where it can do different things for you in an easy
Yeah.
way, without you having to have a much knowledge of how to do an API or anything like that. So those are, I would say, the four things that I look at of, is a GPT the right thing to build or not?
I love your thought around it's like the foundation piece of an agent because an agent is going to be that text to action versus like text to speech or text to words or text to whatever it is. It's fascinating to think about that way. And I was also thinking too, back when I first started doing this and I was enabling a team before custom GPTs came out a year ago or 6 months ago, whatever it was, feels like a year ago. And I had to take these more advanced prompts and I had to tell them I had to do these prompts in a certain way and they had to copy all down and put it in there, and which works. But the problem, the challenge with that is that I didn't have like back then we couldn't attach files to it, so all you had was the context of the prompt and the AI itself, and then you didn't have the entire knowledge base of whatever products or competitive research or whatever it might be, so that everything that AI had was only in the prompt or the parameters it had in billions of parameters. So it then made it so, in my experience, that it wasn't as pointed or as powerful as it could have been with it if it had that knowledge base. So if you don't mind, I'd love to know more about what do you include in the knowledge base and how you think about what to use and what not to use inside of there for GPT.
Yeah, yeah, no. And I think something that you also hit was spot on, which is not something that something that's more particular for like enablement things like going through GTM AI Academy and stuff. One of the things that you're teaching or have to teach is how to prompt effectively or how to think about starting with the end in mind and building to that. And
Yep.
so honestly, even for someone that's struggling with prompting and things, you can build a GPT to help them out and enable them in such a way. So I think there's so many different uses for even learning how to use AI effectively in AI literacy. But going to your question, how do I think about the knowledge base? Let me give you a concrete example that I'll use today because I think it's important is whenever I'm building or thinking about a GTM strategy. And so this kind of GTM copilot, if you will help you build and guide you through building like an end-to-end go-to-market strategy. I don't know that I trust. I know it's probably really good, but I don't know that I trust ChatGPT or OpenAI to go find the best go-to-market
Yep.
frameworks, the
Yep.
best things that I know that have worked in the past, the ones that
Yep.
I use and have been successful. I don't know if it will find those or not. And so if there's ever a sense that I'm not sure if it's going to be the best suited, then I will upload those frameworks or those insights or the things that I want it to reference first to make sure it's going to use that in its analysis and in its output. And I
Mhm.
think that's the most important thing is, are you okay with the general or whatever you think is going to come back? And is that okay with you? And you feel good about that? Or do you really want to point it towards something specific that it will use over and over again and that works for whatever your domain expertise is or whatever the reason that you're building it? And so I think that's the critical function of when I say, okay, yes, I want to make sure I have something in the knowledge base for it to reference.
When you bring it up, which is interesting to me, is that people always ask me like, what can you do to what's the right word? Reduce hallucinations? And I always tell them like
Mm,
AI hallucinates
good
because
one.
either probably more reasons than this, but I usually bucket it into either it doesn't know it and it's making it up because that's what it's trying to do, or it does know it but has too many options and doesn't know which one you want it to pick, so it just picks one and it's not the right one. So having that, I always think about when I teach a class at Bryant, one of the things I talk about is how AI is like water, just rain. And when you focus it like a water cutter, it becomes a super fine line tip. You just can cut through rock, but you can't do it with rainwater. But AI prompting or even AI and GPTs is getting super narrow and saying, this is exactly what I want to have happen, or this is the context I want you to use, but it becomes really powerful. I think people, especially when they haven't seen AI really function at the highest peak, don't know how powerful it is because they're used to the general outputs like, yeah, this is okay, but I'm not really getting what I need out of it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree
Yep.
completely with that. And I think you're exactly right. And I think this is why you'll see more, and you're already starting to see those. I say you because I've seen them. I'm sure you have as well. But maybe for listeners that aren't as in depth in looking at these, is why these specialized models will win. You're not going to see. You're not going to see open AIs or Claude from Anthropic or any of the big models. Just people just build on them. That's been the problem so far, right? Is you just build on top of these large public models that have been trained on billions and trillions of data points, and so you would expect that it wouldn't return really great results in some scenarios. It's going to return better results than you and I can probably just sit here and think about or have time for sometimes,
Yeah.
unless we really put dedicated time and attention. But what's going to happen is the they're going to power smaller specialized LLMs or models that basically are have that domain expertise, because then
Yep.
you stop hallucinations, you get better results. It's almost like the comparing it to the spam cannon of just sending a bunch, tens of thousands of just generic emails out and
Right.
what your return rate would be versus sending out hundreds of very personalized emails and what your return rate would be. And so
Right.
think of the kind of models that way. They'll be specialized. They'll have and that will lead to agents. They'll be powering agents, which will be very specialized. You're not going to have a generic AI agent that does everything for you. You're going to have hundreds of specialized agents that do things for you. And going back to the GPT thing, that's the whole point of the custom GPTs is they do something very specialized for you that you need. And that's how you've built it.
Did you watch the Dreamforce this last week and watch their Agent Force launch?
So I haven't watched it. However, we will be testing these things out. So
Uh,
even before Dreamforce, we've been looking at ways to think about how do we, I don't want to say autonomously automate SDRs, but how do we give them better abilities to research and go after. Second thing is CX. CX is big for us. We have a ton of my company right now has 3 product lines and 2 service lines. And so our post-sale support is huge. It's very complex. And so how do we think about the CX agent? I love the sales coaching. So I'm very interested to see what they
yep.
do out of the box with sales coaching as well. So yeah, so there's some interesting things that I'm super curious about. And we have some meetings set up to go through those and see what we can implement. So
That's cool. I'm excited. And I know you shared, which we'll probably talk about this at another time, but the agent AI from HubSpot. So they're
yeah,
doing something. So
they're doing something similar too. Yeah. You
fascinating.
look at these CRMs, it's going to be, it is fascinating and it's going to be super interesting because you've got the HubSpots and the Salesforces that are these system of records, and they have massive amount of data, but they have very old architecture. They're up and
Yeah,
coming
they're old.
in the 90s, early 2000s, maybe. And think about that. They're 20 plus years old. And so it's going to be
Yeah.
interesting to see how AI and agents will work inside of their current infrastructure and architecture comparatively to like these up and coming AI native CRMs that are like trying to disrupt. I think one is it Day.ai, another one's Aptio or something like that. But there's a
Yep.
few of them that are really building these AI natives. So it's going to be, I love being on the sidelines and watching this because it's super interesting. And who's going to benefit? You and I and many others are going to benefit from
Yeah.
all these things. And so, which is why we're talking about this and trying to share this with others is because everyone's going to benefit in a certain way if you know how to use it and you're curious and you're really experimenting like we do on an ongoing basis.
Totally, man. Well, let's pull up the hood and let's check out your GPT. And if you're okay sharing, you don't have to
What
share
the
like all the
hood?
specifics, but I'd love to see like back end, front end, show us how you work with it and all that stuff.
Yeah, I don't mind.
My
Let
other
me
question
know.
is if you have, I can see it.
You said,
If you use this, just to give some context,
yeah.
you've already built out your GTM function. You've done this before. So do you use this when you're brand new, or do you use this now that you're right in the middle of the thick and thin of things? You're like, hey, I need some help with whatever thing.
Both. So I use a lot of these things for 2 reasons. So one is you're right. So when I first came in, I used this to build it out. I also use this with startups or the advising work that I do
Yep.
for companies or just someone who's looking to start something. And then what I also do is I'll use it on an ongoing basis just to either validate something
Uh-huh.
or help me a lot. Maybe I'm stuck or maybe I'm like, hey, I need just this part. And so I'll use it. I'll use it for that as well. So yeah, so
Cool.
it's something I use ongoing. So if you've never built a custom GPT, so I'm going to act like that everyone hasn't, bear with me. But ultimately, when you open up the GPT builder, you have this kind of messaging capability here at the bottom. So for this one, what I did was I actually just started messaging that I wanted it to help me build out a go-to-market strategy. Now, I didn't plan on or intend for it to build out the whole thing because as we talk about, depending on,
Right.
I wanted it to give me some structure and some thoughts around how it would structure it. So that's what I used here. But basically, if you click on the configure here, that's where really the magic happens to your point behind the scenes. And so once it built out, so what I'm showing you now is the prompt that's here, and I'll walk through this because it's pretty detailed and it's
Yeah.
pretty specific. But ultimately, Chat GPT and the GPT builder got me, I would say on this one, 30 or 40% of the way. So it built out a structure for me, et cetera. And then I went in and was able to edit it through this configure tab, et cetera. And the way that I think about this, and this is where I mentioned this a little bit earlier, or maybe on a previous episode, was I thought about with the end in mind. What is it that I want it to create? I want it to create a robust end to end go to market strategy. That incorporates everything from product to marketing to sales to customer success to competitive analysis, all the pricing strategies, et cetera. So I wanted it to create all of those things. And so I detailed those things out. And what you'll see here, I'm just going to highlight this, is I basically categorized it in 12 things that I wanted it to do. So I wanted it to, number one's up here at the top here, product description. I didn't highlight it, product description. So I'm going to feed it a product description and I want it to learn about that product and service for me because ultimately, depending upon what I'm selling, it needs to know that so it can actually build me an effective go to market strategy. If I'm just throwing out a go to market strategy and has no idea about my product, then what's it going to build for me? I have no idea. So the first thing was I wanted to learn about my product. Second of all, I wanted to build me an ideal customer profile. And then the buyer personas, because again, that's where you start. If you don't know what you're targeting, and a lot of people make this mistake even today, they don't build
Yep.
out their ICP or their buyer persona, and they're over here just trying to sell
Right.
to whomever. So really building that out. And I'll save you the rest of it, but ultimately there's this 12 steps in here that I want it to go through to really build this strategy. And then for each of the sections, I'm giving it specific things that I want it to do. So let's just look at this section for an example.
Yep.
So this one is for the ideal customer profile section. I want it to use the product description. I want it to provide it the response in a tabular format. And I want it to include things like firmographics, psychographics, behavioral attributes, and technographics. In each of the sections, I told it basically what is it that I'm looking for from
Yep.
the information that it has. And I did that for each one. So again, save the there's a lot here. Obviously, you can see it took me probably 3 or 4 hours
Man,
to do.
that's
But,
robust. Yeah.
but ultimately, the point of it is going back to something we talked about being specialized is I wanted to ensure that it was going to give me the most optimal, at least in my mind, output when I was looking for it. So
And
that's
for
kind of
reference, for people listening, Jonathan's done this by hand manually for years, so he knows what he's looking for as far as output. So, yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And that's where, and that's a good time before we continue on because ultimately, this is where I think people using AI win is like AI is not just going to go and do things for you. It's no silver bullet, but those that have domain expertise. So, like for me, go to market is my domain expertise. I've been doing it for 20 years. I've seen
right.
public companies, I've seen pre revenue companies, I've seen startup companies of all different sizes. And so ultimately, I've seen a lot. I research and I study of this stuff a lot. And so I know what's going on. So to your point, think about your domain expertise, think about the knowledge that you have and use AI to just catapult that to another level.
Yeah, that's
We
great.
talked a little we talked a little bit earlier about the knowledge base. So what you'll see here is there's a few things that I've got here. So there's this kind of motivate overview. So this is a pricing strategy doc that I've used. Here is some 6 go-to-market motions, an ROI framework. You can see here's my IP. So this is my go-to-market strategy document that I've
Yep,
spent years on. And then there's revenue architecture, which those that know I'm a huge fan of that. And then the other one that I'm a huge fan of
yep.
is Mark Roberts' is Science of Scaling. So basically, I've put in here what I want it to make sure that it knows and utilizes on any of its responses. And then obviously, you'll still use the web and everything else too. But that's your knowledge base. Then you've got your capabilities down here. So web browsing, image generation, and code interpreter. So I'll leave those on. And we talked about create new action. Not going to, this one does not have one. And we can, I know we're going to do another episode on automation where we'll use that. But for this one, you don't need that button. So let's see what this thing does. So I'm just going to tell it to build my go-to-market strategy. And then what I'm going to use is momentum. So since I'll see, let's, because you are, is it momentum.io?
Yep,
Okay. So let's see how good this thing is and you can pick holes in it. All right. So what it's asking me to do is once I build my go-to-market strategy, it's going to say, hey, look, I need to know what is your product. So you can either tell me about it by answering these questions.
yep,
You can upload documents. So if you have collateral or you have information that you want to share, you can upload it here. Or you can simply just give it a website. For the sake of everything, I'm just going to give it a website. And so what it will do is now it will search Momentum's website and it will start learning about what is the product and service that Momentum does. And it search 6 sites. So here are the 6 sites that it searched just to get a little information about Momentum. And then what it's going to do is it's going to basically tell you what Momentum is. So here's the information, here's the core offering, here's the key features, et cetera. And so it's going to build that kind of product description out for you. And the reason that it's going to tell you these things is because if more about it, or if some of these are not the right things, obviously you can say, hey, can you change X, Y, and Z? And you can keep going. So
Yep.
here's what it did: build out your core offering. Momentum automates the collection of insights for current customer interactions, talks about some of the key features, and then differentiation and the problem that it solves. So now it's saying, hey, let's go to the next section. So I'm going to just hit yes. Let's go to the next section. And then this is going to be your ICP section. And so now what it's going to tell you is, again, what it's going to do here. And if you remember in the prompt, I hit this section. So let's spend a little time here. I said,
Right.
here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at the ICP. I want you to create it in a tabular format. And I
Mhm.
want you to build out some of these things like company size, industry, motivations, all these things. So I put some of it in there of what is it that I really want it to come back to me for. And so this is now is built out your ICP. So again, you can look at this and you may say, hey, some of this is great, some of this is not, or whatnot. But ultimately, in just a few seconds, you got your product description, you've got your ICP. Then I can go to
Right.
I can go to buyer personas next. And what you'll notice is, again, it's going to go through all 12 of those steps. So we probably don't have time to go through all 12 steps, but ultimately, this is going to build out now your buyer personas. And it's going to it's going to build out three of them. So VP of sales, tell me about this. Are these pretty spot on? VP of sales, rev ops director, and sales manager. Are those
Yeah.
there, not there? Is that kind of who you
Uh,
target?
to give some transparency, I am consulting right now with Momentum, so I know their
Oh,
backside pretty well. And we just literally, I consulted them on this. So
oh,
we
did
just
you?
went through our ICP. Yeah. The VP of sales, yes. Rev ops director, yes. Sales manager is usually a little low, but as long as they're sales leader, yes. Essentially, correct. This is all looking good. Everything I've seen so
Awesome.
far is looking really good. There's definitely some things I know that we need to update on the back end, but they're like most startups are just continuous stage
Oh,
of
yeah.
iteration. But
Of course.
overall, phenomenal. Yeah.
Love it.
Well,
Awesome.
I
Cool.
was gonna comment one
Yeah.
thing real
Yeah.
fast so you can
Come
go
in.
through this. What I've realized too is that when I first started prompting, I would tell people to respond in specific ways, like with commands or other things. As I got more progressed, I like you did, I ended each part of it with a question or like some sort of guidance so that the prompt itself knew how to ask the user to prompt itself to be able to do the answer because
Mhm.
it's much more simpler. Because before, if you have to train someone of how to speak really specifically, they won't use it as much. But if you do just the natural conversation and use the AI to enable the person to use the AI, it becomes really powerful, which I love
I'm
you've done this in this.
I'm glad you called that out because you're exactly right. Because when I first built it, I struggled with this because I was like, okay, if for me, if I'm the only one using it, it's fine because I know what
Right.
it's doing. I built it. But then I started like sharing this with people because I knew it could help with them. And then they didn't know how to use it. And I'm like, why don't they know how to use it? And then that was a like light bulb moment for me was you're exactly right. After each section, I have it ask if they want to they want to have more information about the current section that they're in,
Right.
to ask a couple questions. Do they want to move on to the next section? Or what is it that they want to do to your point to spur that? It's almost like having a conversation so they know that
Yeah.
there's something that they need to do and they're guided on what is it that they need to do. So you're
Right.
100% love that point. Thank you for calling that out.
Yeah.
Um,
I've noticed that with some advanced prompters, it's the simple stuff like how do you help the user actually use what you're trying to get them to use? So, yeah.
exactly, 100%. So next section here just went to some brand messaging. So I have it start with 3 frameworks, and you'll see this as well in some of the things is I usually have it either ask about a framework that you want to use or just use 3 to start, and then you can say, "No, I don't like that framework, use a different one," or something like that.
Yep.
Again, going
Yep.
to that point. So for this one, it used the unique value proposition framework to come up, a
Yep.
story brand framework, etcetera. So now we're gonna go to sales messaging. So I can just click yes down here. And then, yeah, so maybe this is but I think you get the kind of point here. It can go through and build all these. And so now not only is it built the marketing messaging, but what it's going to do here is going to build your sales messaging based on Spice. You can use Medic, MedPick, chat, whatever that you use. It's got all of them loaded in. But basically what it's going to do now,
That's
and this is
cool.
where some of the chain of what's happened previously. So first, started with product description so it understands. Second, built ICPs and buyer personas. Because if I didn't do that, it's not gonna know how to create my sales messaging and my
Right.
marketing message because it's like,
Right.
okay, who am I talking to? Everybody I talk to is different. And if I don't
Right.
know who I'm talking to, it's gonna give you a minimum, not an optimal output. And so what this does is it goes by persona and then it starts building out your situation, pain, impact, critical event, and decision criteria for each of your personas. So here's your RevOps director, does the same thing with some messaging, same thing with sales manager. So again, like it's going to go through and it's going to keep, I think what do we got next? We got, so it's going to do go to market motions. So what it'll do next is it'll go through and it'll create your go to market motions. It'll even recommend the best one for you. And you can even put some information in there if you want to fine tune it, like here's my ACV, et cetera, et cetera. But based upon your personas, based upon your product and description, and based upon its knowledge base, it's going to come up with here are the pros and cons of each go to market motion. And here's what we recommend that you do. It's going to
Hmm.
give you a brand marketing strategy. So this will be taking that brand messaging, that sales messaging, and then how do I actually tactically build a plan around executing it?
Yep.
What's my best pricing strategy? So consumption, subscription, et cetera. Demand gen, same thing, sales process, customer success strategy, challenges and risks. So it's going to go through this. And by the end of it, you can create a PowerPoint or a Word doc, et cetera. And it'll basically put this 12-step framework, if you will, full go-to-market strategy in one place. And so that's how I've built it in order for me to use it myself. And so, for example, you said, why would you come back or what would you use? Right
Right.
now, we're actually going through a pricing strategy change. And so I can use this and I can say, okay, based upon our current go-to-market motions and our pricing strategy, you may use a little different if you're PLG versus SLG, or if you have a partnership channel that you're using your
Yeah.
go-to-market, your pricing strategy may be a little bit different. And sure, I could go prompt ChatGPT and say, yeah, hey, I'm looking to create a pricing strategy, blah, 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 blah. But if I go through this process, it already has so much information and insight about my go to market, it can provide me a better result on what it is that I'm looking for. And that's really the reason that I come back and use it on and on again. So yeah, happy to share the link and everything. But ultimately, instead of just having you go through each 12 steps, you can see what the point is and how it works.
That's cool. I did this exercise back in the day when, again, before 4.0 came out. And I don't know if I told you the story, but when I was in my MBA class doing marketing, we had a cohort of 5 of us. I was one of them. And we had a month and we had to do this same thing from a marketing lens. And it took us a month to get there. I did
Wow.
this manually. I didn't have a GPT back then, obviously, but by prompting in probably an hour or two. And I produced something similar to what we produce. And I sent it to my team. And I'm like, hey guys, how long do you think this took me? I don't know, probably at least three months. I did this in 2 hours. They're like,
2 hours.
forget, like, I don't think
Yeah.
people understand how powerful this is and how long it takes when you don't have this, because it takes a lot of freaking time, to do a good job of it. It's crazy.
Forever. Yeah, you're right. And you think about putting like a go to market strategy like this, or heck, even a component of that. Like, what are the motions or the messaging? Think about, let's just land something simple on messaging. You would sit, you would think, you would ask people, you'd try to figure it out. You'd have to pull all the resources in and stuff. It would take people, it would take weeks or months to figure this out. And then
Yeah.
now you can just have a starting point. And it's not saying, look, you're not saying that, hey, this is what you're going to end up going with. But guess what? In literally a few minutes, you're 80% there. Now it's just about tweaking it. And so I
Right.
think that's the biggest thing to your point is it used to take so many people in such a long period of time that you can get started and get so far along the way in a couple hours, or if you've already got it set up, a couple minutes. So it just
Yeah.
depends.
I think too, it's important to know that, like, when you look at, for example, the Science of Selling by Stage 2 is a great overview. Then you have revenue architecture, which the AI may or may not be trained on, but even if it did, it's one of 50 different books it could possibly be looking at. So
Mhm.
once you narrow it and you say, I want you to look at this specific book and then tell me what I should do from this point, is a way fine-tuned output. I remember in the day it used to be content is king, and now with AI, I'm like context is king.
Contact.
Because
Oh,
if people know context, then the
trademark
AI is like,
that.
trademark fam. But then seriously, because every time I prompt and I get something wrong, I'm like, I didn't give enough context. It's my fault. I'm the problem. It's not the
Yeah.
AI's fault. So
And we've chatted about that on other episodes too, because it's so many people give up. I think there was some wild statistic. I don't know if it's still accurate or not. We should look it up and see. But I think it was like 40 or 50% of like first time Chat GPT users churn because or
yeah,
they don't convert because they're not getting the app. They're like, oh, this is all this does for me. It's not
yeah,
that's not really great. But it's not because the AI is bad. It's because you've got to know how to use it and prompt it the right
right,
way. To your
right,
point. And
exactly
so if you
right.
don't do that, it's almost like your CRM and data. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you give it a garbage prompt, it's going to give you a garbage output, just like everything else
Yeah.
that we mess around with.
I think in essence, I was looking through this, like I was thinking about if I had to make a prompt that would do what you did and not use a GPT, that prompt would be huge, massive.
Yeah.
And just from the ones I have a ideal length, which is pretty long actually, but after a certain point, I find that prompts, if they get to a certain threshold of prompting, doesn't do as well. But for some reason, the GPTs, even if I put a crap ton of stuff in there, it does much, much better. It's
Absolutely.
almost like you're taking prompting one step up from just prompting in the GPT because it's super focused. It's easy to use. And yeah, I did. So quick story before we wrap it up. I did the same thing at GPT at a past company where I uploaded all of our product information, value prop, and all this other stuff. And my team spoke other languages. They spoke Spanish and Portuguese. So I was trying to help enable them in other languages on the stuff we just learned about value prop and all this other stuff. And so I sent them this GPT. They all had paid accounts, thankfully. It was a protected link. And they'd send me back stuff. And I'd be like, I have no idea what this means, but I'd put it back in GPT, say, translate this for me. And the conversations are great. They're asking the right questions. You can write stuff out of it. And it's stuff I couldn't have done real time because, again, I don't speak the language.
Yeah.
But because they had the GPT trained in all of our stuff and it responded in a way that I knew I needed it to, I was enabling them on what they needed to do on messaging, on strategy, on sequences, on anything you think about in the sales process with our product and with our value prop and messaging. It was awesome. Could
Mhm.
never have done that before. So it's just crazy. Think about
It's
that.
it's amazing, and again, that goes back to, I know we've said a few times, but the importance of having it train on your knowledge set or what it is that if it's your product or service, if it's your domain expertise, because then it's just repeatable things. You can ask it, you can engage with it. And just like
Yeah.
each one of those steps, as I was mentioning, at the end of it, you can engage with it in a conversation about that specific things. If it's sales messaging, you want to tweak it live before you
Yep.
move on to the next step. But because now it has all that information, it's going to be a lot more accurate, and the results you're going to get are more optimal than you would have had. So,
That's cool. I know we spent more time. We were going to go into the future state stuff. We're
mhm.
wrapping up on time, so we'll have to do that next time.
All
But
right.
the backend GPT is awesome. So you're going to give it the link. I'll put it in the show notes
Yeah.
and make
Yeah.
sure people
Give,
can access.
give the
Okay,
link and everything. Yeah.
cool.
Absolutely.
I'll include it. So if you're listening to this, you want to try out his GPT, I'll include it in wherever the heck you're finding this podcast at. It'll be attached. And as per usual, AI GTM powered. No, AI powered GTM. Sorry, I always say it backwards.
AI powered GTM, brother. Yep. You got it.
AI powered GTM and the GTM AI podcast. I am going to be launching out the actual website for both of us here this week, which would be fun. And then we'll have
Woo!
our unified place, which would be fun.
It's official, baby. Let's
It's
go.
official. That's right. So, Jonathan, as always, man, I love our conversations. It'll be fun to do the next time we get more, whatever stuff we're going to nerd out on next will be fun. So,
Excited.
let's
Future stuff, right? We're gonna
cool.
talk about some really cool futuristic stuff. That's
Yeah, the
next.
future
Love
stuff.
it.
Yeah, which is sadly, not, I shouldn't say sadly, weirdly, probably in the next 6 months because it's
Right,
going so
yeah.
fast.
So
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, so fast. But, anyways, y'all, thanks for listening in. My man, thanks for joining.
Anytime. Thanks for the invite.
Love it, love it.
Cheers,
See you on the
everybody.
side.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.